All right, so want to understand these trade wars that seem to be popping up everywhere. Well, good thing you're here. We're going to really get into it, break down all the tariffs and retaliation, and try to figure out what's at the heart of this whole thing. It's early March 2025 now, and President Trump, he's just slapped some pretty serious tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. But here's the thing. They're not just sitting back and taking it. They're hitting back, each in their own way.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, but we're going to untangle it all for you. We're talking a Mexican president who's standing strong, Chinese tariffs aimed right at the heart of American agriculture, and border towns feeling the pressure more than anyone.
It is pretty amazing how quickly this all blew up, don't you think? It really shows you how these trade disputes, they're almost never just about, dollars and cents. There's national pride, political gamesmanship, all that's mixed in. Yeah. It feels like one wrong move and everything could explode. So let's rewind a bit and see how we got to this point, because things moved fast. March 4th, bam. Tariffs hit Mexico and Canada. We're not talking about targeted tariffs here. This is a blanket 25% on everything. Same day, tariffs on Chinese imports jumped too, up to 20%. Now Canada, they're taking their time. They've got 21 days before they retaliate. Makes you wonder if they're hoping for a last-minute deal or something. Is that kind of wait-and-see approach, is that common?
Well, it's an interesting move for sure from Canada. Could be they're hoping things calm down or maybe just buying time to come up with a really strong counter strategy. But don't be fooled. They've already announced retaliatory tariffs on over $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, so they're not playing around either.
And then there's Mexico. President Sheinbaum leading the charge. She came out swinging, calling the tariffs unjustified and personally offensive.
That tells you a lot right there. Sheinbaum's response, it shows she's willing to stand up to the Trump administration, protect Mexico's interests, even if it risks making things worse.
She did not hold back. Her exact words. There is no motive or reason or justification that supports this decision that will affect our people and our nations. Strong words. And they're planning to hit back with tariffs too, but playing it a bit differently. They waited until March 9th to announce exactly what they're targeting. What's the strategy there, do you think?
I'd say it's a calculated move. By waiting, Mexico shows they're open to talking, want to avoid things getting out of hand, but at the same time, they're making it clear retaliation is coming if necessary.
So kind of like taking the high road, hoping the U.S. might back down, but ready to fight if they have to.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance to strike.
All right, so Mexico and Canada are figuring out their next move, but can't forget about China. What's their game plan here?
Well, China's counterattack, that's particularly interesting. They went right for a specific sector, one that's politically sensitive too, American agriculture. Soybeans, pork, chicken, the stuff that really hits American farmers in the pocketbook. And those farmers, they carry a lot of political weight.
So hitting them where it hurts, basically.
You got it. It's a strategic move, putting pressure on the U.S. government by going after a key voter base. And that's not all. They've also gone after U.S. companies operating in China. For instance, Google. They're facing an antitrust investigation now, basically. The government's checking if they're using their size to squash competition.
So they're playing this on multiple levels, hitting the U.S. economy from different angles, showing they're not backing down easily.
Right. Showing they have leverage and they're willing to use it. And this whole thing, it could really mess up global supply chains too, meaning shortages and price hikes for people all over the world.
Yeah, it's clear this is already having a global impact. One thing that struck me, though, is what's happening on the U.S.-Canada border. Those communities are so closely connected, it's more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, These are real people whose lives are being directly impacted.
You're absolutely right. This is where you really see the human cost of these trade wars. Those border towns, they often share deep economic and social ties. People live, work, shop, have family on both sides. These tariffs, they disrupt the very fabric of those communities, hitting families and businesses hard.
It makes you think about those decisions made in Washington, Ottawa, Beijing. They have real consequences for people on the ground. And let's not forget, Canada's planning to retaliate with tariffs on over $100 billion worth of American goods. That's going to be a huge blow, especially for those border communities.
Definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already tense situation. And it reminds us that we can't just look at the economic and political calculations. We have to consider the human impact, too. Welcome back. So we've seen how these trade wars have gotten out of hand so fast, but the big question is, what happens next?
Yeah, it feels like we're just seeing the beginning of something much bigger. Where do we go from here? Could this keep spiraling, or is there some way back to, peace?
The billion-dollar question, right? One possibility, and it's the one that keeps me up at night, is that this escalates even further. Higher tariffs, more retaliation, everyone digging their heels in even deeper. That's the worst-case scenario, and the economic fallout would be huge for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's not a pretty picture. But there's got to be a way for them to talk it out, right? Can't they just, like, sit down and negotiate?
Well, sure, diplomacy is always an option. In fact, it's the best one. You could see renewed efforts to negotiate, try to find some middle ground, come up with a compromise that everyone can live with. But there are some serious roadblocks right now, and I'm not just talking economics here.
So you're talking about the political stuff, especially between Trump and Sheinbaum. And then there's that whole drug war thing. That's got to be causing some bad blood.
Absolutely. Trump's accusations against Mexico and the way Sheinbaum pushed back so hard, it's created this atmosphere of hostility, makes it tough to come to the table in good faith, you know? And then you've got China with their own goals, which often clash with the U.S.
So even if they do manage to get everyone back to the negotiating table, it sounds like it's going to be a long uphill battle to get to an agreement everyone's happy with.
Oh, it would be a tough process, no doubt. Everyone would have to be willing to give a little, really try to see things from the other side's perspective.
Okay, so we've got the potential for things to get even worse on one hand and a really tough path to a negotiated solution on the other. Is there, like, a middle ground, something in between?
There is a third possibility.
Yeah.
Stalemate. Imagine the tariffs stay where they are, but no one makes any more aggressive moves. Not ideal, but it could be what happens, each side waiting for the other to blink first, trying to ride out the economic storm.
So a high-stakes game of chicken, basically, with the whole global economy hanging in the balance.
A risky game, for sure. Because the longer this goes on, the more damage it does. Businesses scrambling to adapt, supply chains getting all messed up, leading to shortages, delays. And in the end, it's the consumers who really feel it. Prices go up, choices go down.
Speaking of consumers, let's talk about what this means for everyday folks. We've talked about the economic stuff in general, but how is this going to affect our lives, like, on a daily basis?
Well, think about the things you buy all the time. Groceries, clothes, electronics. A lot of that stuff, or at least the parts that go into it, comes from Mexico, Canada, or China. When tariffs go up, the cost of those goods goes up too. So yeah, get ready for price increases on all sorts of things.
So basically everything just gets more expensive. Not exactly what anyone wants to hear. Anything else we should brace ourselves for?
Higher prices are definitely a big worry. But there's also the chance of shortages. Remember at the start of the pandemic, everyone rushing out to buy toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Imagine that happening with like electronics, clothing, even food. That's the kind of disruption we could be looking at if these trade wars keep going.
Okay, this is starting to feel a little too real. Is there anything we can do to, protect ourselves?
Well, the most important thing is to stay informed. Know where the things you buy come from, how these trade wars could affect how much they cost, and if you can even get them. That'll help you make smarter decisions.
So this deep dive is a good place to start, right?
Absolutely. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be. You might also think about supporting businesses that make their stuff here in the U.S. or buy from countries that aren't involved in all this.
Makes sense. But if I'm being honest, it all feels kind of overwhelming. Like, what's the point of being informed if I can't actually do much to change things?
I get it. It can feel like these global issues are way beyond our control. But remember, knowledge is power, right? Even if you can't stop a trade war by yourself, understanding what's going on can help you make better choices, both as a consumer and as a citizen.
And hey, maybe if enough people understand what's at stake, it could put pressure on the people in charge to find a better solution, something more peaceful.
That's the hope, right? That through talking, understanding, and remembering that we're all connected, we can build a better future for everyone.
I like that. Now, before we move on, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. The impact on those border communities.
Yeah, those communities are right in the crossfire, feeling the effects of this more than anyone.
I can picture these towns where people's lives straddle the border, so connected, it's like the line doesn't even exist.
That's exactly it. The border, for them, it's more of a technicality than a real barrier. They share economies, families, cultures. Their lives depend on things moving freely back and forth.
And now suddenly, that flow is being cut off. Businesses that rely on cross-border trade are in limbo. Families are getting split up. The whole community is being torn apart.
It's a tough situation, and it really shows the human cost of these trade wars, a cost that often gets lost in all the talk about tariffs and numbers.
So what can we do to help these communities, show them we support them?
Well, one thing we can do is raise awareness about what they're going through. Tell their stories, make sure people hear their voices, remind everyone that there are real people behind all these statistics.
We can also support organizations that are helping these communities, whether it's legal aid, financial support, or just giving them a space to share their experiences.
And let's not underestimate the power of simply connecting with people. Reach out to folks in those communities. Hear what they're going through. Let them know they're not alone. Sometimes just a little kindness can go a long way.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture and forget about the individual people who are being affected.
We always have to remember that these global events have very real consequences for real people.
So to recap, in this part of our deep dive, we've looked at the different ways these trade wars could play out, from things getting even worse to finding a way to negotiate a solution, or maybe just ending up in a stalemate. We've talked about what it could mean for consumers, for the global economy, and about the real human cost being paid by those communities along the U.S.-Canada border. We've covered a lot in this deep dive: the tariffs, the retaliation, the chances of things getting better or worse or just stuck. But what I keep coming back to is, what does this all mean in the bigger picture? Like, what are the real consequences of these trade wars?
It's a good question. If we zoom out a little, I think the big lesson here is trade wars are complicated. There's so much going on, economics, politics, and there's rarely a clear winner.
Seems like everyone involved is going to lose something in the end, whether it's economic stability, their reputation, or even just, that sense of working together that we're used to in a globalized world.
You're right. And it's not just about the money either. These trade wars, they chip away at trust, make tensions worse, and that makes it harder to deal with other problems that need everyone on board, like climate change or threats to global security.
Yeah, it feels like we're moving away from that interconnected world we've gotten used to. Instead of countries working together, we're seeing more me-first attitudes, countries trying to protect themselves, even if it hurts others.
And that's a dangerous road to go down. In today's world, our economies, our lives, they're all tied together. What happens in one place affects everyone else. These trade wars, they're a wake-up call. They show how connected we really are, and they highlight the need for a more cooperative, forward-thinking approach to global trade.
So if we're moving away from this global cooperation model, what does that mean for the future? What's the alternative?
Tough question. Honestly, I don't have all the answers. But I think it's important for everyone, people, businesses, governments, to realize how risky it is to turn inward, to become isolationist.
So what can we do as individuals? It's not like we can solve these trade disputes ourselves.
You're right. We can't control what world leaders do. But we can control our own actions, our own choices. First and foremost, stay informed. Don't just skim the headlines, dig deeper, look for different viewpoints. Really try to understand the complexities.
So do our own deep dives, you're saying?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to question things. Think for yourself. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so be a critical consumer of information.
We also have to remember that we're not powerless. We can speak up, support policies that encourage cooperation, fairness, sustainability, and international trade. We can contact our representatives, support organizations working to build bridges between countries, and have real conversations with people from different cultures.
You've got it. It's about recognizing that we have a role to play, using our voices and actions to push for a fairer, more just world. And don't forget empathy. It's easy to get lost in the numbers, the tariffs, the trade deficits. But we have to remember, there are real people behind those numbers, people whose lives are being turned upside down by these decisions.
So stay informed, stay engaged, stay empathetic. That's what we're taking away from this.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Maybe these trade wars, as disruptive and scary as they are, maybe they can be a wake-up call. A reminder that in this world where we're all connected, cooperation isn't just a nice idea, it's essential.
You've given us a lot to think about, as always. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning about these issues, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. Until next time.